Albert Chen, welcome to Think Global Do Justice. How are you doing today?
Doing well. I'm
Yeah.
glad to be here.
AI is all anybody's talking about, and we know that it has an impact on Christian nonprofits as well. So I know you were the man for the job. Albert, I would love if maybe we could just kind of start, just allow you to introduce yourself to our audience, the work that you're doing, the background, and just kind of what God's been doing in your life.
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Albert Chen. Currently live in Boston, but I've spent some time both in tech startups, in ministry, campus ministry with InterVarsity, then ended up spending some time working in finance corporate for a global organization around serving financial institutes around the world. And then most recently spent about 5 years working for a nonprofit ministry in the slum communities of Mexico City, doing everything from working with churches, partnering with community leaders to work on health, education, and advocacy projects. So that's kind of, the background, which then led into a more recent season of going back into startups and tech, specifically around the AI space. And so I currently find myself in a place of teaching, educating different organizations, both businesses, nonprofits, ministries, and foundations on AI itself, helping them lead their organizations through this whole new wave of AI, and with a few of them actually building on top of the AI technology that is changing every single day.
You've been a boots on the ground person, so I look forward to even just kind of diving into that and what your time in Mexico was like and kind of what those integrations look like. But before we do, I have a question that we ask everybody at the top of the show. So, Albert, why do you think it's important for Christians to not only consider the needs of their own families and their own communities, but also the needs of other people in other nations?
Well, I think it's important because we live in a very, very interconnected world. The choices that we make, both as consumers and builders, and how we serve and live, it's all impacted by what's going on around the world, and what we do impact other people around the world. Whether or not you are aware of it, that is absolutely the case. And some of that is informed by just my own understanding of the global economics, as well as having lived and served alongside families who were impacted by that on the other side of things, even as Americans. There's a lot that we don't think about, right? If I think about, the corn industry and the subsidies there, and how that then impacted the farmers of corn and other agriculture in Mexico City, or in Mexico in rural areas, and that then drives certain types of economic crisis, which then led folks there to go into the city of Mexico City looking for jobs. I realized that some of the things that I benefited from in the U.S. indirectly or directly resulted in a lot of the displacement of communities in the rural areas of Mexico, and that fed into these informal settlements in the city. And that just blew my mind. Going and living under the roof of a family who said, we just moved here, a couple of years ago because we were looking for economic opportunity, and then realizing, wow, we are way more connected than I ever realized.
Yeah, we're more interconnected than we even realize. I mean, I think that sums up so much. It's inescapable. I think we can have these movements towards nationalism and so forth, but there's no way to get around that we do live in a globalized world, and and it's a very complex system as well. So what was going on in the communities in Mexico where you were ministering and partnering with an organization down there, I mean, it's intrinsically connected to what you're doing in Boston or what I'm doing in Tacoma. All these connections are really profound. I kind of want to start just kind of getting into your background. Let's kind of like set the stage. You spent 5 years working, what do we say when it's Mexico? Do we say abroad? We don't say overseas. In another country,
Yeah.
doing community development in Latin America.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit, just kind of like that experience, what you learned from living, working cross-culturally, because a lot of the listeners, like, they get that part. They don't get the AI. So, but you're one of us, Albert. You've done the cross-cultural ministry piece.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about those years in Mexico and what type of work God was leading you into.
Yeah. I mean, it started off with just going and seeing what it was all about, what God was doing there. I went early on as a student to serve with a local ministry, and was just blown away by what God was doing there. And as they say, it's not like I was bringing God with me in a suitcase. I showed up and he was there. And how I would kind of sum up what I felt like was a call was not God sending me to the ends of the earth. It was me walking in on a block party, essentially that feeling, and God telling me, you want to stick around. And I said, absolutely. And, at that time, his call to me was say, finish what you started first and then come. And so I finished what I started. And years later, my wife and I decided to leave everything and go and just see, all right, God, whatever you have for us, we're here. And, that part of that was bringing all of us who we were. We weren't pastors. We weren't, we were Excel people. We were operations people. We ran organizations, and that's kind of what we did. And we brought those giftings with us, and we were there to come alongside the amazing local pastors and amazing community workers who knew their communities inside and out. And I was there to help with Excel. I was there to help with technology. And one of the things that I had to do immediately was throw out all my preconceived notions right out. Funny story I tell people is, setting up a SharePoint solution, cloud solution, where people are checking in and out documents. I thought of all the best practices that leveraging my background in, corporate tech, and realizing that in some areas they didn't even have internet or signal, and said, all right, we're going offline and we're just doing thumb drives, passing it around, working on spreadsheets on people's laptops, to which, going to community centers and working with folks and them telling me, hey, sir, we got to go home now. I was like, why? We were in the middle of this. And he's like, well, laptop ran out of battery and there's no electricity here in the community center. So we got to find a place with power. And so realizing like, all right, maybe we got to use pen and paper for some of this. And the reality is just very different than what we have sometimes in our both, idealistic perspectives of what this type of work would look like. And it just requires just a level of humility to say, we don't have all the answers, we don't even know what we're going to run into. But am I willing to just say, okay, God, I'm here, I'm obedient, and I'm here to learn, I'm here to walk alongside and go on this journey together. And ultimately, I'm here to partner with whatever God is already doing in these communities, knowing that he was there before I got there. He's there doing all the real hard work as we show up and get to play this little part. And he's going to be there after we leave, right? And just having the humility and entering into that with joy.
Amen. That's a good word. Yeah. It reminds me of a conversation we had with Luke Perkins last year where we were talking about the Great Commission, even cross-cultural ministry. It's not just for the people that are gifted in terms of like preaching, pastoral ministry, and so forth. It really is supposed to be for everyone. And that's one of the things I love about integral mission and transformational development is that it acknowledges that there's other pieces and other roles for people to play in terms of that community development. So I love that. All right. So you were in Mexico, through 2022 or so forth. And then you came back and you just got yourself equipped in AI. Yeah. What was kind of your inclination? Because AI is ubiquitous now, ever since ChatGPT a few years ago. But you kind of got a little bit of a head start, it seems, in terms of kind of diving into that. What was your inclination towards specifically AI that you kind of felt that direction?
Yeah. Well, as someone who had spent some time trying to operate on the field, there would be times when folks would come in with a piece of technology that would just blow my mind and feel like, oh, this solves so many of my problems. And they would say, didn't you know about this? And I would say, no, I didn't. And so coming back, I realized, I have the opportunity to be able to play that role for a lot of my friends who are still doing this really hard work. And so I really wanted to understand what is out there and what is the edge and where are things going. And part of that was AI and machine learning, and it was more machine learning than AI at the time, and definitely not generative AI. And so as I started to see what was possible, I had this kind of sinking feeling of like, oh, there is movement here, and it is moving quick, and most of the world has no idea that this is coming. And as soon as certain things unlock, it's going to change the world. And part of that was realizing that natural language processing at the time was getting better and better and better. And eventually, when ChatGPT happened, it made accessibility something where, someone like me who doesn't have a formal technical background could use all my experience understanding language, communications, strategy, psychology to be able to understand, talk to, navigate, and steer a lot of these systems. And that was huge. because there's a lot more folks like me who are doing the good work on the field than there are programmers who have data science and Python knowledge. And so I wanted to help bridge the gap for everyone else who might not realize that they actually have the potential to be able to leverage and steer these tools now, than having to wait to hire a technical expert to be able to do it for them.
Okay, so I want to kind of start like top of the understanding and then drill down into how, like, specifically Christian nonprofits that you work with. I know Michael shared how you did workshop at Accord Network, like those types of practitioners. Like, we're gonna get there, but I kind of want to start. So like you just kind of blew through this, and I was like, whoa, okay, I don't even know what all of these things are. You said there was already machine learning, but there wasn't AI, and certainly not generative AI. It seems like you just discerned between, or like deciphered between three different things, and I'm like, I would just conflate all of those. I don't even know what all this is. So let's start there. What are we even talking about? What's machine learning? I remember I had a dude in my church small group that he was like working in like radiology or whatever, and I remember him saying like, oh yeah, we've been doing machine learning for a while. Well, AI is like making massive inroads in radiology and like detecting things and like so forth, So he kind of came out of that and was like, well, we always had machine learning, but now this is kind of like next level. So that's just like one sector.
Yeah.
What do those things mean? What are the differences? Is this just kind of like an evolution of the same thing? Kind of help us understand those: machine learning, AI, generative AI.
Now, and at the risk of, oversimplifying things, and so if there's any technical experts, don't quote me
We're
on
very simple people around here, Albert, when it comes to this. So be as simple
exactly.
as you like.
So this is to help everyone understand this. This is all under the broader umbrella of artificial intelligence, AI, right? Machine learning is a way for AI to be able to learn, right? And so within AI, though, and like your friend said, this has been around for decades. It's been around for a really, really long time. Machine learning is responsible for a lot of AI getting really, really good at predictive analytics and personalization and things like that. I mean, that's been around and leveraged heavily for the past several decades already. It's the reason why Netflix and Spotify know, what you want to watch. It's the reason why when you're browsing TikTok and Instagram, it just knows what you wanted to buy, even though before you even realize it. And it's also the reason why, Alexa and Siri are able to navigate some of the complexities of human language and understand, millions of people around the world, even though it hasn't been the greatest, but they're getting better. That I will call kind of traditional AI, right? That's about predicting the future. That's about matching patterns. I mean, you have organizations like financial organizations that have optimized this for trading. So that's been
Is
around.
that the algorithm? Like, is that machine learning? Are those two things going together? Because we would say that, oh, the algorithm, and
Yeah.
like you said something and then it showed up and I looked up this and now I see it. Like, is that?
Yeah. So I would say it's about turning code into algorithms that can then predict it, either predict and pattern match or predict things in the future. So that's kind of this bigger, broader category of just AI, and specifically machine learning is a way of doing that. And that's what I would call traditional AI. What we're in today, and a lot of what you hear about AI today is they're talking more about generative AI. And so when you hear Gen AI and generative AI, this is about AI creating new content, words, picture, sound, code, video. So that's what's spawned a whole bunch of new companies and products, and excitement and stock market activity over the past 3-4 years, right? And that is taking they use machine learning as a process to train these models. And so you'll hear the word model a lot. Like, oh, we've got a new model out there. ChatGPT is essentially built on a model of GPT. And everyone has their model, whether it's Claude out of Anthropic, or Grok from Elon Musk, or Gemini out of Google, right? Everyone has a model, and they've trained these models to be able to simulate and predict what the next word is, or the next line of code is, or the next character is, based upon everything that precedes it. And it learns these patterns based upon all the diet of data that we've fed it. And so, one thing I tell everybody all the time is AI is biased, 100% biased. It reflects the bias of the training data, what was fed to it. And so if your training data is a bunch of Twitter, you're going to sound like Grok. That's just part of it. If your training data is a bunch of Reddit, then that's what it's going to sound like, right? And for Christians who are wondering, like, yeah, if you train on a lot of good theological information and Bible, then yeah, it will be able to reproduce a lot of that. So the training data really does matter. And then all the things they do after the training of it also matters. And there's a lot of things that impact how it responds, but that's the whole new class of AI that we're seeing today, which is generative AI.
Okay. All right. So I inadvertently use Gemini because if I just Google something, that's what I get now. But if I were to say, all right, I'm going to throw this into Anthropic, but it's the same prompt, I'm going to get something different based on the training data?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Each model has their own flavor and style and personality. And that has to do with the engineers and the researchers behind it at each of these AI labs. They are deciding what are we trying to optimize for? Are we trying to solve, the world's most complicated math? Are we trying to solve for coding? Are we trying to solve for, friendliness, helpfulness? Are we trying to solve for political correctness? Are we trying to solve for free speech? Right? All of them have their priorities, and so the engineers have their marching orders. Or, if you're a company like Anthropic, they have, existential dread that AI can go wrong. And so they are really worried about alignment and safety and security. And so Claude, their AI, reflects a lot of those. So you start to see like each AI model reflects the anxieties of the makers behind them. And they align, that's the word, they align to those values.
Okay. So I kind of want to bring in the faith element. So for us as Christians, I'm just kind of like thinking like this is not a benign thing. So if I were to say, I think maybe people would be like, oh, it's just like an advanced Google search, like that's pretty benign. But if it's being trained in a way, and you're saying, look, these developers kind of have this kind of in their psyche when they're developing this, and these people have these others. If I were to say like, would I want to? Man, I got off Twitter, like, especially when, after Doge and everything, I was like, I'm not going to support this dude. So I got off of Twitter. But if you were to say, like, would I want to, like, just have Grok, which is like Elon Musk's Twitter, whatever, like, process stuff for me and then tell me what I should do? I'm like, I don't trust that, Yep. But I do it to Google. Are they great? I don't know if they're great or not. Like, that's just what I use. Yeah. Is there one for you as a discerning follower of Christ that you're kind of like, this is probably the one that's best? I don't know. I feel like you use Claude, right?
It's true. I use nearly all of them.
Okay.
Part of that is it's my responsibility to test them. And at the end of the day, part of it comes down to actually using them and see which ones more accurately or more precisely reflect your own values. That's just on a personal level for everyone around the world, Christian or not, right? If you want to use the AI and you're starting to delegate some of your, activity, thought, even you want some opinions, well, if it's always giving you answers that you just disagree with, then, try a different one. I tend to use a lot of Anthropic's Claude because I value them as a company and the way that they've had to navigate some of the trade-offs. And so they tend to be a little bit more transparent in their safety research, and they're more risk averse, which for both enterprises is good. For nonprofits, I think is good because they're not so quick to, they call it build fast, break things. They're building fast, but there's a lot of things that go before they actually release it out into the wild for everyone else. That being said, I do also use ChatGPT every single day. I use it kind of in my day-to-day. Hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? Tell me a little bit about this. I use Gemini. I just ran some experiments last night where, they've got a new image model called Nano Banana Pro that is crazy in what it can do as far as layering, annotating images, creating infographics. And so I mix and match all these tools together, and then a bunch of products that are built on top of those platforms and models. I use them all just to kind of test out and see what it is.
Okay. So I'm interested in how you think through all of this ethically. So you said that I think it was Anthropic is like nervous or whatever. They kind of build that into their model. There's a lot of people that are nervous about it. One could maybe say Brandon Stiver is a little bit of a Luddite, or I'm not crazy about technology. I feel like my family and I, or my wife and I, we just watched Adolescence, which I'm just like, oh my gosh, social media is the worst. Like, and I just kind of see like, is any of this enhancing my life? Like, I don't know. And then we talk about like the AI, is it a tech bubble? So you bring in the economic piece, and then you kind of say like, man, we're like, so I'm a believer in Christian nonviolence. So I'm like, man, we're already like having people in Nevada like drive drones in the Middle East and shoot people. Like, do we want to now let the robots do that for us? Like, I just kind of like, and I'm not like a doomsayer, like, oh, this is all going to happen.
Yeah.
But we tend to go like going back to that like Silicon Valley, like go fast and break things. We tend to just kind of like, oh, well, we can do this and we can do that. And we don't stop philosophically or ethically to kind of think through like, should we be doing this? Is this, So how do you kind of wrestle with the ethics of using this kind of advanced tool that has gotten better? I mean, I remember OpenAI. I had a friend at the nonprofit I was working for before my current org, and he was like an early user of OpenAI's like thing before ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And he was like, check this out. Like, it can write like our marketing copy and stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And now it's like from there to even now, it seems like it's really advanced and really turned into a full-on industry, obviously. So how do you kind of think through this evolving technology from like an ethical standpoint?
Yeah. So I would actually break it out and even complicate even more the question into three different buckets, right? There is the building of AI and ethics around that, which that's a whole other conversation in and of itself, right? The data centers, the data that went into it, the copyright, all of that, the water consumption, energy consumption, especially when we think about creation care, that is a very important question, right? And even the data and the algorithm and the bias in those base models themselves, like the foundational models, and I'm not just talking about large language models. I'm also talking about computer vision algorithms, face detection, all of that. So there's one ethical question around that. There's the ethical question around the technology that is and products that are built on top of that, right? Are we using facial detection to then screen for people, right? Or flag certain things? What's the data privacy protection of the use of that information? Who's collecting all that? What are you allowed to do with that information? What decisions are being done are being made based upon that decision? So there's a question of that, right? Technology that is being built off of this technology. And then there's the use of all of this, right? The consumer use of all this. And what does it mean for me to use a product that is built upon all these two things, right? That you can't be fully ignorant around that, right? That doesn't absolve you of the responsibility that you are supporting the use of a product that has been built off of, what skeletons are in the closet, what bodies, are under the bus because of all of this, right? So that I do think what you use, right, before you even think about how you use it, what you use does matter. It's the reason why I don't tend to enjoy using Grok because I understand there's a lot that went behind the support of that, making that happen, right? And it's also
Which was the one where they had like people in Kenya that were like feeding it a bunch of information? Was that Grok?
That was OpenAI.
That was OpenAI.
And
Okay.
part of that is because a lot of these companies outsource their data sourcing, because creating these things require a lot of data. And not only the data itself, but the process to improve, enrich the data, the process to enrich the model after it's been baked, if I were to use that analogy. And a lot of them outsource that to companies like Scale AI, or they want to get expert data from like Handshake or Mercor. There's a couple of different companies in this. Scale AI was then subcontracting out or hiring workers around the world to do this stuff. And again, cheap labor is how they saw this, and they said, oh, we don't have to worry about the long-term effects of them having to do this hard work, right? So it's kind of like, you think about like the poisoning that miners had with, the company is like, I don't care, we're paying them. And it's like, well, long-term exposure to this kind of chemical harms you long-term. Who's taking care of them?
Right.
That's the kind of stuff that you got to think about when it comes to
It gets back to what you were discussing, the interconnectedness of everything,
yeah,
and somebody's got to train these models. You have these people do it, but now they're like constantly getting into like all this content that's just really potentially harmful
yeah,
psychologically. And okay,
yeah,
all right, yep, I'm tracking with you. All
yeah.
right, so those are the first two buckets.
Yeah, those are the first two buckets. The use of it is different, right? The use of it is, 100% people, bad actors are going to be using this for bad. And then there's going to be a bunch of good people who misuse it intentionally and unintentionally. That will result in negative impacts, right? If someone uses this to come up with a hiring decision for them, like tell me who to hire, it's 100% going to reflect the bias of the model and the company and the engineers behind that model, right? And so you're going to be introducing bias automatically. And then this is where I warn both nonprofits and foundations, beware of the bias. Now, that's unintended, negative consequence. And then there's okay, how do we be wise about this for positive things? What does it mean to be, discerning and use this to maybe save some time or help you improve something or help you see around corners? There's like so many positive benefits. So I don't want to just like, rag on AI. There's a lot of positive benefits, but there's a nuance of how to use this responsibly. And then thinking about, okay, I maybe had saved an hour here, but what is that doing to me? So that's another thing that people got to be careful of. Like, how is this forming me in the use of this, right? There's a lot of, articles about like, oh, is AI turning your brain into mush? And the way I would say is cheating turns your brain into mush, right? If you just outsource anything and decide, I don't want to think about this, you're going to lose the ability to do that. Now, one could say also delegating, probably you lose your edge around something when you delegate. And we see that as a positive thing for the most part. So then what's the nuance between cheating and delegating to AI? And part of it is the level of ownership, right? Are you willing to stand by AI or not? Human or book or article or research, are you willing to stand by what the final output is and not be like, oh, well, ChatGPT told me that, Grok told me this, Gemini told me this. Are you saying, well, I don't care who you heard it from. If you are telling me this, then you must stand by it. That means you've double checked whatever it is. You've applied some kind of like sanity check to it that you feel okay passing out. Because when something goes wrong that you've given me, I'm on the hook, damages, legally, whatever it is. I'm going to go back to you and say, hey, you told me this is good. You're going to own that. You can't be like, well, AI told me this. Doesn't work like that, right? So I think societally we're gonna have to like kind of update our own algorithms of how we think about AI and the use of AI, where it's like I looked this up on the internet, so it must be good. No, you got to check your sources now, right? Even if it's Wikipedia, you still got to be like, did you double check that? You don't just take that you just take it at face value.
Mm.
So there's some ethics around that
Yeah,
about the use of AI. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's really helpful. Everything that you're sharing, Albert, I think these are the types of considerations that we need to have before we engage with a technology like this. You are a part of Praxis. I'm a fan of Andy Crouch and just kind of his thought leadership. Tell me a little bit about, because Praxis recently released some kind of guidance or whatever you guys called it around AI. Can you sum that up for us a little bit?
Yeah, so they released maybe about, what was it, a year and a half ago, their redemptive thesis for artificial intelligence. And part of it is built off these kind of six assumptions. And, it's something that they've been working on for some time, and Andy's been kind of at the forefront of all of this. And based upon those kind of six assumptions of understanding, who we are, Imago Dei, and the role of technology in all of humanity and the role and the tendencies of humans in as it pertains to technology and power. Built off those, what are kind of six redemptive directions around this? And I don't need to list them all here. Maybe you can link to it in the show notes or whatever. But the one that catches my attention that I was happy to be a part of kind of advocating for was there's the sixth one, which is redemptive AI will benefit the global majority rather than enrich and entrench a narrow minority. And a lot of this stemmed from, if you really think about a year and a half ago, we were not sure if AI would be available to everybody. I think at this point in time, we can say it's going to be available to everybody. Granted, there are different tiers of AI, right? And the most expensive ones may not always be available to everyone. But AI as a base level, which is incredibly powerful, is largely available to most people. Although accessibility, as far as navigating language, all of that technology infrastructure, that is still a big question, right? How do we keep this available for everybody? But that being said, if AI is a very powerful and transformative tool that can scale and improve anything, idea, business, organization, naturally those who understand its power and have access to it are going to leverage that to increase whatever it is, profits, revenue, market share, all of that. And if those who didn't have access to it are kind of left in the dust, then you're going to have this increasing inequality. And if you see this across the globe, right, if AI was only in the US and the rest of the world didn't have access to it, I would have huge problems with that. And probably one of my biggest things would be, how do we get this in the hands of everyone else? I think at this point in time, the companies themselves realize we can't just build this for ourselves. This is something that needs to be for the benefit of everyone. And so you do have different movements of closed versus open. You have open source AI models out there that are largely available to everybody. But part of it is thinking through how do the benefits that we're seeing out of AI, how can people around the world leverage this?
Yeah.
And what does it mean for us to really think about if the companies in Silicon Valley or Wall Street are the only ones who can really leverage this to see huge gains, then what does that mean for the rest of the world, right?
Yeah.
If everyone's at equal footing of leveraging the same technology.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And we will link that redemptive framework from Praxis. We've had Praxis people on here over the years, and just really appreciate all the work. And I think that's a really good framework for us all to glean from. I do kind of want to, excuse me, I kind of want to talk about practice. So we have a lot of Christian nonprofits that listen to this. Some of them are small, some of them are large. They know AI is out there. They know that it is a tool. I mean, when Michael was on here and we were talking about this a little while ago, he was saying, some people are ready to basically, let go of their whole marketing team because of all of the ways you can use AI. How are you advise, you help organizations kind of understand AI, utilize AI. How are you kind of supporting them? What does that look like? And then what are some of those supports that can help Christian practitioners working in the nonprofit space?
Yeah. So I will say I differentiate between augmentation and automation, right? When you think about automation, then you think about we can do things a lot more efficiently and automate, and we can take the human out of that. And then all of a sudden, we only need one for every 10 people to do the same job. And then that invariably leads to either, in a for-profit context, if you can sell more, great, all of a sudden you 10x your revenue. In a nonprofit, I like to say, well, there's kind of infinite demand. And so theoretically, you can serve more people. And, rather than thinking about it from a purely cost savings perspective. I also say, even if you're not able to serve 10x more people, but you can save your staff maybe 30% of their time, I tell them, hey, that might be worth it, because sustainability and being able to have personal enjoyment, work satisfaction helps people stay in this. And a lot, if they can go home and have dinner with their family or not have to work over the weekends, and that helps them stay in this job longer, then great. That to me is worth the investment. I would not be so quick to fire folks because at the end of the day, the quality of AI seems impressive, right? It is that by nature, it has taken the average of the internet and all of this data and figure out the patterns, and it can simulate and regurgitate all of that out there. Now, unfortunately, that quality exceeds a lot of people. So in some ways, you're like, wow, this is amazing. But experts in the field see this and you're like, feels generic. Because it is generic. It is by nature, by design, the average. And if it is mediocre. And if you are so easily contented by the mediocre, well, then it probably says something about your own taste or the quality of your organization. And for some organizations, that's fine, right? I'm not saying everyone has to be super excellent and everything, because that does take time and effort and experience, and you have to care about that, right? I happen to care a lot about PowerPoint slides. And so would I expect everyone to produce PowerPoint slides the same way that I do? No, because I probably spend way more time on it than I need to. For other folks out there, if it's just about getting words and making them look visual and pretty, then they can use a tool like Gamma.app, where they go and just makes things look pretty for them. That's nice. Spend more time on the actual content itself, right? You don't need to spend hours like me nitpicking pixels. And so it's a matter of like what is important to your organization. And when it comes down to nonprofits and the work they do, a lot of the stuff does feel tedious and maybe unnecessary, right? Like you got to ask yourself, is this contributing to the mission? Is this helping us achieve greater impact or not? If taking a lot of time, that something as just like you are, 5x more time consumed, like it takes longer, for you, then maybe it is worthwhile to use some kind of tool to help you be more efficient so that you can spend more time spending time with your team, spending time in the community, talking with constituents, talking with beneficiaries to understand the needs better, or coming up with like new program design, right? I personally don't like to spend so much time on my email. And so I use AI on my email. I use a software called Shortwave, and it saves me a ton of time on my email so that I can spend more time in meetings talking to people, right? I use Granola, which helps take meeting notes so that I can spend more time and be much more present talking to somebody during a meeting. I use all these tools so that I can think about what are the things that AI can't do, that I provide a lot more value in, and that's where I need to be. I want to spend more time in things that I am uniquely equipped to do as a human, not an AI. And then for the things that there's a lot that AI can do that humans can do as well. And you got to ask yourself, should AI do that? Right. And for a lot of folks, the answer is no, AI should not do that. This is where it requires wisdom and discernment. I warn people, don't undermine trust with your donors, with your partners, with the community, because trust is going to be one of the most important things as we think about this next season of AI everything. You're going to see a lot of slop everywhere. You're going to see a lot of things that look impressive and polished, but at the end of the day have no soul or real depth to it. And that the difference is going to be, was there a human who really put thought into this, put their soul into this? We're going to start to discern that in the same way that we can start to tell when things are Instagram polished or Photoshop.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. Yeah, because what we want it to be something that hopefully enhances in a way, is a marker of our creativity, and not something that's just kind of this generic substitute for who we are as people that are created in the image of a creator. Albert, what would be some ways, before we wrap up, I do kind of want to help people, our heart with this podcast is just, hey, tap into other people, other resources. What are some ways that people could either follow up with you or some other resources that might be valuable to them?
Yeah. I mean, they can find me on LinkedIn or my website. I like to post pretty regularly on things that I see that are going on or things that would be helpful for people. That might be tips here and there or new developments like, Anthropic Claude just released Claude for Nonprofits, which is essentially 25% of the team cost. So it's a lot more accessible. I mean, if you don't see the value of AI for $8 a month, then, and the caveat here is I'm not telling everyone they need to use AI for things. I'm telling people they need to understand it, right? And if that means dabbling in a little bit on non-consequential things, that's what I would recommend. And if you feel like, okay, we can use this in a way that is responsible, then go ahead. But we can't really bear our heads in the sand now.
Yeah. No, that's really good, Albert. And we will have those links in the show notes so you guys can just follow from there. Albert, before I let you go, we have one question. It's kind of our rapid fire end of the conversation question. For someone who is pursuing God's heart of justice in the nations, what is one thing that Albert Chen would recommend that they do?
Everyone has a different kind of what's important to them, but for whatever God has put on your heart, and if you are running an organization or participating in some missional purpose or cause, think about and be honest. Like, how might AI change the way that you're operating, right? And so that you can spend more time doing the things that God has uniquely equipped you to do. And then think about, if there's something that you really care about, that's an issue or problem in the world. Really thinking and being honest with how might AI change the way that we address those, right? Which then informs the way that you serve those communities. And then I think there's a bigger question that you might need to ask yourself, and this is where I recommend all organizational leaders to be asking themselves this question, is how is AI going to change the world that your communities or stakeholders live in? If you don't wrestle with that question, we're going to be solving, or we're going to be addressing something that is quickly changing around us. And so if we care about our neighbors, if we care about future generations, we need to be asking ourselves, what is the world they're going to be living in? What is the world that we're going to be living in? And start thinking about, how do I prepare myself for that today? And what is the unique role that we as Christians play in that world? For one, it's the loneliness epidemic. People are turning to AI as their God because AI is also revealing certain idols and breaking down other idols. Idolatry of intelligence, idolatry of power. A lot of these things are all of a sudden being revealed with this new technology, yet people are going to go and turn to the next idol. And so what does it mean for us as Christians? What does it mean for the church? What does it mean for those of us who care about the nations to be thinking about what is our response in this time? And on a very, very high level, macro level, as people deal with the existential dread of, is AI going to destroy the world? All the way down to, is AI going to take my job? What does it mean for us to come with the hope that we have as Christians, and knowing that our Creator, our God, has written the entire story, and we know how the story ends, and we find our hope in that. We know that He is in control, and we get to just play a part in that story. And so what does it mean for us to bring that hope to our neighbors, both near and far?
Amen. That is a good word, the hope that we have in Christ. Jesus saw this coming, and his church was around 2,000 years ago. It's around today. It'll be around for all of eternity. So we have a tremendous hope. Albert, thank you so much for joining the show. This was enlightening to me. I know it's going to be enlightening to our listeners. I really appreciate it, brother.
Thank you. This was great.
And to our listeners, may Almighty God, who created us in his own image, grant us grace to fearlessly contend against evil and to make no peace with oppression, and that we may reverently use our freedom and employ it in the maintenance of justice in our communities and among the nations, to the glory of God's holy name, through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with the Father and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. And we will catch you guys on the next episode of Think Global, Do Justice.
Thank you.